Welcome to Workstyle Stories, because life changes and every life is different. This week we're going to be talking about living an unstructured and untimetabled life in response to having had one beforehand and making the switch between the two, and also living abroad, living in a new environment, new culture, new language. And to talk about that, I'm joined by Melissa. Hello, Melissa. But before we get into all the detail, Melissa, please let us know who you are, what you do, and where you are.
Hello. Hi, Alex, and anybody else who's joining. I'm Melissa Fretwell. I'm a marketing consultant, and I left sunny Lincolnshire to the White Isle. So I now live in Ibiza. I'm in year 2 of existing on what is a fabulous island.
What are you partying every night? Is it all just, sunsets and huge tunes? What's it like, life in Ibiza?
Oh, if only it were. No, actually, one of the reasons we moved here was not to have a midlife crisis and burn the candle at both ends. It was all about kind of readdressing the balance. And actually, what's been interesting comparing the 2 years pre-pandemic and during pandemic is that you realise actually what you love about the island is the space, the landscape, the kind of the way that there is this lovely vibe that everyone talks about. It really does exist. The light, the fact that you can, mix with very interesting, different characters, different types of people. It's great.
Must be a completely different vibe to Lincolnshire, no?
Well, Lincolnshire was a social experiment, Alex. Right? Okay. So we lived in London for a long time, moved out to the Shires for the good life, did this epic commute down that East Coast train line, if anyone knows it. Very dangerous coming home because you could end up in Leeds or Newcastle or even Edinburgh some days if you fell asleep.
It's a pretty long train ride, isn't it, for an international audience? So talk us through that then. So what was that commute like, and how did it work, the social experiment?
Well, the idea was, again, to try and have a bit more space. Obviously, London is kind of incredibly expensive to live on. If you want some kind of garden, we wanted chickens, we wanted to do a bit of the old homegrown veg action, which has always entertained my team, who are like, music TV nuts, and I love music with a great passion, but I also love gardening. Anyway, so going back to the journey, I'd get on my bicycle and head up to the Grantham station and get on the train, and it would be this really, if it worked, it was kind of an hour and 15 to King's Cross, and then off you went on to the tube. The tube was probably the worst part of the journey, to be fair. And you get by, you end up doing work, you end up kind of catching up on shows, whatever you had to watch for work sometimes as well. But it's just when it went wrong, it became an epic schlep just to get back home.
So at best, what are you talking, an hour and 45 door to door?
Yeah.
And at worst, assuming you don't fall asleep, couple of hours, 2.5 hours.
It could be. I mean, sometimes trains would turn around and go back to King's Cross, which is like the ultimate demotivation when you're trying to get home. As long as you would literally turn around at Peterborough and have to go home and work from your home office.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so that's a long commute for what should be a lifestyle gain. How did you find that? Did it deliver?
Well, initially, it took quite a while to adjust to live this really timetabled life, because obviously there's only probably a couple of trains an hour. So the first 6 months were quite hardcore in terms of readjusting to that lifestyle. And then you kind of got into it because your weekends felt like weekends away, and you had this sort of nice pace. But when your family setup changes, so the first probably about 5 years, we didn't have any kids, and we decided we wanted to adopt. And we were like, actually, let's try this out and see if this can work. So you have an adoption, I guess, time off, your period where you're spending time bonding with your child, and then going back to work was the big test, really. And that's where it got really tricky. And I had hugely supportive employers. Channel 4 is run our HR, and they said, work from home when you can. But the reality was it's probably a day a week from home, because being in the office was quite important, because we were producing lots of shows and had lots of things happening where being in person was kind of important.
So why didn't it work so well then? Was it about the amount of time that you were actually at home once you'd started and become a family unit?
Yeah, I think that's it. And anyone who's got kids will understand the need for routine and bedtime at certain times and waking up at certain times. It meant you just sort of literally this person that would be waving morning, probably not even making bedtime sometimes. And I love reading a good story, even to this day. My daughter's like 12, we still do it. Slightly different stories, admittedly. So being here is great.
So so that heavily timetabled life that you had, I mean, presumably you had to lead for a while, even having it really well organized and on the good days, you know, things going like clockwork, you still didn't really have as much time because you were spending, even on a good day, probably 4 hours on the train or in commuting. So what did you change and why did you change it?
Great question. I mean, everyone has their dreams, don't they? And they tend to put them to one side when you have a very busy life and routine.
Absolutely.
And what started to kind of, I guess, encourage us to dream again was when you have these wider changes going on, i.e. Brexit, and the fact you can see kids are a brilliant measure of time passing. And I was like, actually, there's two big flags here to go and take the leap. So I set up a little spreadsheet, as you do, plugged in some destination countries and worked it back from there. You know, looking at things like cost of living, distance from the UK, language, all that kind of stuff, and tried to make a really smart choice in terms of where to live next.
So you made that choice, and then not only did you decide, okay, we're going to go to Ibiza, you actually then followed through with it, which of course is another thing altogether. You know, it's one thing dreaming and having a vision and an ambition, is quite another to actually pack up your stuff and go. So what were you hoping to get out of that then, that big shift and big change of lifestyle?
I think the main aim was being more in control of that timetable and setting your own work hours, being able to take a break to begin with and really understand the lie of the land. And it's a small island, but it is, you know, trying to get under the skin of local life. Lots of people come here and put their kids into international schools, which is great for them, but we wanted to really integrate as much as possible, spend time learning Spanish. I mean, spent years learning French and German, but you know, why not add another language, which I do actually genuinely love doing. And then it's thinking about, okay, the other thing I suppose I was missing from my previous routine is that I don't really like routine. So I like that element of surprise and the fact that as your Spanish gets better, the phone will ring and you'll see that dreaded Spanish number. You're like, okay, I'm going to go and answer it. Because sometimes in the early days, because you'd be like, you know, I'm really sorry. I mean, I'm English. You say all this in Spanish, right? I won't practice that right now. And then they'd hang up because they'd spiel off something. You'd be like, I don't understand what you're saying. And now I'm at the level where I'm like, I can take that Spanish call. I'm gonna see what's actually happening and follow the conversation and get my delivery or my appointment or whatever it is I'm trying to do. And I really relish those daily challenges.
I think that's awesome that you see that and relish it as a positive, because I'm sure that for most people that would feel like a really daunting part of living in a different country, and that positive mindset that you have, it almost embraces unpredictability, and you're kind of thriving on it now, which I think is probably a mindset that helped you with that transition in the first place, and possibly an insight into you and perhaps why that rigid timetabled regime wasn't working out for you so well, and for you to be self-aware enough now to know that actually you really like that and thrive in that that unpredictability and the flexibility that you want in life. So you're answering calls in Spanish. Brilliant, well done. What else is your work style kind of enabling in terms of more flexibility or fluidity?
I guess it's thinking about like going back to the child situation whereby you want to make sure that you're there when your kids from home and having the meal times. Again, another thing we was missing completely were good meal times, etc.
Yeah, so important.
And Spanish school, aka part-time school, finishes at 2. So you know you're going to have that late lunch. So you're adjusting all your patterns really. So you're having a late lunch, and then maybe there's an activity in the afternoon. So it's just being there. And I don't do it all the time. I've got a hugely supportive partner in crime who's great, and he helps out as well. So we've got this lovely pattern where we can sort of pass the baton or be together, whatever that day brings. And that also means you can work in the evenings or work whenever you get that kind of that moment of inspiration. We're like, right, I'm going to do some planning today because I've got that there and I can grab it.
I find it really inspirational to hear you talk about how, you know, that unpredictability of those phone calls in Spanish is just so human and so exciting and part of the adventure of life that I think we all miss when we're locked in a regime of too much structure, of commuting, of office time, and of not enough exposure to the beauty of life, the unpredictability of it, and the people we meet along the way. We've come to the end of this chat, but we're going to have a Q&A. So for our viewers watching on the video, we've been Workstyle Stories. We'll see you next time.